Hi, this is Brendan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Joel Clark for another episode of Wuxia Workshop. And today we're going to be talking about Duel to the Death, a 1983 film directed by Tony Ching-Sui-Tung. He's the director of Swordsman, Swordsman 2, East is Red, A Chinese Ghost Story, a bunch of really big movies, including recent films like Sorcerer and the White Snake and other movies like Naked Weapon. This was Joel's first time seeing it. And it's a very unusual film. It really had a big impact and influenced a lot of other movies. But it's basically about a Japanese and Chinese rivalry where there's going to be this big duel between a champion from Japan and a champion from China. But somebody is trying to mess with the integrity of the bout and perhaps fix it. And there's also a background plot where they're trying to where they're actually using the duel in order to do something else that'll have bigger implications for the feud between Japan and China. And so that's the very basic bare bones description. I should say it stars not Andy Lau. It stars Damon Lau and Norman Chu, as well as Flora Chung and Eddie Ko. Joel, what did you think of the movie?
It was really fun. It was really fun in a way that I wasn't expecting, although it doesn't make any bones about what it's going to be about. In even the opening scene, like you've got an invasion from ninjas stealing a kung fu scroll, and all kinds of zany hijinks ensue. So I really enjoyed it. It's extraordinarily well acted. I'm glad you mentioned the actors, because I'm not going to say despite the zany premise, but in addition to the zany and straight up kind of goofy, wacky stuff that goes on, like there's a lot of really strongly acted dramatic points in the movie that, I don't know, they anchor it in a way that makes it really satisfying to view. I had a lot of fun with it. I compare it a lot to Ninja Scroll. I think that whenever you're talking about the things that inspired, probably it inspired a little bit of Ninja Scroll too. There's a lot of scenes with the ninjas where they're doing stuff like they're throwing their ninja stars with the accuracy and deadliness of a submachine gun.
Yep.
And they're just like completely covering whatever area they're throwing at with ninja stars. And that's exactly echoed in a scene in Ninja Scroll. So I'm pretty sure there was some cross-cultural pollination going on there, which, again, Clash of Culture is a powerful theme in the movie, which is well and respectfully done. There's a lot of it to appreciate in it, actually.
And I just want to head off any criticism online of something I just said. I know I mentioned that he directed Swordsman 1. I realized that was also a King Hu film, and King Hu was the initial director, but that there was some complications. Yeah, I think he took it over. I can't remember the exact details, but I just wanted to clarify that because I know that the King Hu fans might. And Swordsman 1 definitely looks very different from the other Swordsman films as a result of that. But yeah, so... Yeah, I think what I like about this movie is, number one, it's kind of goofy, like you were saying. Like, it's a little, like, it definitely gets into some weird territory, but there's like this underlying quality to the way the film is made. Like yes. That, even that opening shot you mentioned where the ninjas kind of just are running down, fit towards the camera. There's something really impressive about the way that shot is set up, and the way that they use music throughout the film. Like every time, and again, it sort of borders on goofy, but it's the music is very well put together and selected, and they use it right. Like every time the characters are moving from one place to another, you get that glorious music, and I just find that in a wuxia movie that adds so much to the experience.
And it's almost like a Terry Gilliam movie, where like it is really zany, but at the same time there's a powerful emotional core to it that kind of ties it all together.
Yeah, no, I agree. In fact, it's funny how quickly it can go from, like, you have the scene with the master, which is totally goofy. It's almost cartoonish. The master who's, like, falling out of the tree and hitting his head and complaining. And it pivots at the very end of that scene into something a little bit tender and heartwarming. And, it's the kind of movie that can do that. And, again, I think you're right about the actors. Damon Lau is very effective in this role. And it may be in the hands of a less skilled actor. All of these dialogues where the two fighters are talking about honor and duty and all of these things that can sometimes come across very heavy-handed in a film. It's believable because they again, it's you have Norman Chu and Damon Lau are largely the ones that are who's the chemistry between them is what's really important in the movie.
Yeah, they do have a powerful chemistry through this movie. Like, I don't know, which one of those guys is the samurai in this one?
That's Norman Chu. That's Norman Chu.
Okay, well, Norman Chu is a freaking madman in this one. He's really, really good. He's very serious. He's very heroic. He's very complicated, although he does that in a really straightforward and comprehensible way. Really impressive performance. And yeah, again, I want to point out that there's a lot of like goofy stuff that happens in this movie, and like he's almost stereotypically a hidebound, honorable samurai, but he sells it. He sells it in a way that's really genuine and heartfelt, and it makes everything that happens with this character that much more like tragic and immersive and believable. So, surprising heart to the zany ninja movie.
What I like about the Norman Chu character, his name is Hashimoto in this. He
cool name too. Forgot about that.
Yeah, no, he has a very distinct name, and I think Damon Lau was Lord of the Sword was his moniker. But I like that he just wants to have this duel. Like, that's all he wants. He just wants to have the duel. That's his overriding thing. And at one point in the movie, he reaches this point of agreement with the Damon Lau character where they're both kind of on the same side, trying to make the duel honorable and not tainted by this conspiracy that's going on. And and the Norman Chu character even goes against the wishes of the Shogun in order to make this happen. So he sort of has torn loyalties going on here. It looks like him and Damon Lau are becoming friends. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're almost like becoming, or at least there's a mutual respect. But then he does this horrible thing. Yeah, and
but they both want to kill each other. It's weird.
Well, I'm going to spoil a very crucial plot detail. So if you haven't seen it and you don't want this spoiled, though I think you can see it coming a mile away.
You can, but you know what? It's worth it to watch it, even though it's not necessarily surprising. So I wouldn't worry about spoilers in this movie so much as I would just kind of make a mental note to yourself to go watch it. It's very much worth a watch.
Yeah, I would agree. And but there's a scene where Hashimoto is trying to convince Lord of the Sword to have the duel after this conspiracy has been unraveled and they've sort of put everything, they've sort of saved the day. I thought the movie was over, even though we hadn't had a duel to the death yet, because they totally resolve the plot. Yeah, well, and it's funny. Yes. It's funny too, because then you're like, oh yeah, it's called Duel to the Death, and now we're getting the Duel to the Death, and again, I don't know what the title is in Chinese, so sometimes it's wasn't even part of their thinking when they were putting the story together, but it feels like you've been warned this is a duel to the death, and then you stupidly forgot it was a duel to the death. And Norman Chu is going to remind you, no, this is a duel to the death. And so Damon Lau is taking his master back to Shaolin Temple on horseback, and he's refusing to fight Hashimoto. So Hashimoto's like, well, I bet if somebody close to you died, you'd be willing to fight. And then he just up and kills the master. And
his sole nefarious act in the movie.
Now, how did you feel about that final duel? Because it's an interesting conclusion, I thought. I'm curious what your feeling is of the outcome.
It is. I think the term Pyrrhic victory was ringing in my head during that duel, because it is spectacular and gory, and it's so gory that it's almost cartoonish.
Yeah.
But there, again, the acting between those two like powerhouses, like the performances are so like heartfelt and so believable that like it never tips over the line into outright wackiness. It just feels like brutal and explosive and terrifying. So I really enjoyed it, but like nobody is the winner at the end of that duel. Yeah. They're both so hideously maimed and bleeding to death. And they're both standing. Like, no one clearly loses or wins, and that's great.
Well,
that's the whole thesis of the movie.
I felt that the Norman Chu character... So, I'm going to spoil the duel, and we're going to have to talk about the outcome. He stabs Norman Chu in the stomach, right? Like, it looks that looks like a lethal wound to me. I don't know if he was dead or not, because there's this trope in wuxia movies where the guy dies and they just stand there. And it was in this movie, it's a little hard to tell if he's still alive or not in that moment.
Yeah, he's like propping himself up with a sword. He's clearly wanting to fall over and die.
Like, remember in 8th Diagram Pole Fighter, it opens that way. There's that death scene like that. And also really, they do it before. What was that?
That was a heartbreaking scene. We got to get to that too, but like, yeah.
No, that definitely was. But the Damon Lau character, Lord of the Sword, his arm gets cut off as he's making this maneuver, and the fingers on his other hand get cut off. So he's got nothing left. Like what he's got his kicks basically. He can kick and he can slap you now, but he has no means of holding a sword anymore. So he's
lost in everything but in being dead, even if he's killed Norman Chu's character.
Yeah, and to a degree, at least the swordsman is dead, I think. So I don't know. It's a really upsetting outcome, because normally in these movies, there's at least like either they would both die and it's clean and conclusive, or one of them dies and one of them survives, and it's like, okay, either the guy I wanted to win lives or the guy I didn't want to win lives, but I kind of have there's a sense of continuation. But with this, it's like there's nobody's going on to do anything else after this duel. There's
nobody staggers out. Like I said, there's no winner in this, like, because there's just not. It's at the best it is a Pyrrhic victory for the former Lord of the Sword, but even that is like completely robbed of any meaning, because they're having dueled to the death after it mattered. Like, again, I can't stress enough how much the plot is over by the time they get to dueling to the death, and it's only important to the characters that it happened.
No, and there's a lot of stuff that leads. I mean, like, we're glossing over all this plot, but like the whole thing where with Master Han and the competition and him trying to restore his family to its former standing, and sculpting his daughter so that she can be the vessel for that, and then spoilers again, he ends up killing her accidentally
after falling in love with her.
Yeah. So, well, no, I mean, Master Han kills her accidentally after. After Damon Lau falls in love with her. But yeah, no,
it's a wonderfully tragic thing that sort of just kills the character's ability to have any kind of happy ending.
No, exactly. But it's also interesting that the Damon Lau character, Lord of the Sword, the moment she dies, he just kind of walks out of the room. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, he's done.
Yeah. He sort of accepts it pretty quickly.
I mean, like, yeah, and again, in a lesser movie, that would seem sort of goofy. Like, he's just walking away. The woman he loves is lying there dead, and her father's, like, cradling her body and weeping in madness. Nah, I'm out. But because of the way he carries it, it's like, okay, you know what? No, he's right. Like, he's very much like a paladin character. He's a super good guy in this one. And so, at that point, like, it's hideous, but justice was served. And, like, it hurts him personally, but it was at least a just outcome. So,
well, and I think, and I'm always a little bit perplexed by that scene, because I don't know what his character is actually thinking. I'm wondering, does he? Because I guess on one hand you're right. Like, Master Han is kind of getting his just desserts in that scene.
In a lot of ways, the death of his daughter is a punishment for him.
Yeah, but on the other hand, she was sort of resisting her father's plot, though she initially had helped. So it's a very, I don't know. I just don't. I have no real clear sense of what his character is feeling in that scene. Maybe we're not supposed to. Maybe that's the point. Maybe he is. Maybe he's feeling an awful lot of things, and he just is deciding to focus on the mission.
Yeah, that's kind of the vibe that I always got that I got out of the scene the one time that I watched it. I'm saying always, like I watched it a million times. No, but I mean, like, because he storms out of there, and he's clearly upset by everything that just happened. But, like, he's also a big enough hero that I think that he's focusing on the broader issues that are at stake, which then completely resolve.
Yeah.
And so, once they're resolved, his, like, heroic impetus is gone, and he still has to duel to the death.
The thing that he's solving is actually rather interesting. Master Han is working with the Japanese, and the Japanese shogun is using the duel in order to distract the Chinese so that he can kidnap their greatest heroes, basically, and then bring them to Japan, and then they can, learn about their kung fu and then use that against the Chinese. Is the premise.
Let's not gloss over the goofy ninja subplot. This is their plan. They're going to steal the Chinese masters in little boxes and carry them to Japan with their army of ninjas. And again, wacky.
And it works really well because they use a lot of, like, the wire work is very well done. So there's this horizontal movement across the sky as the ninjas are carting them off in these boxes. And there's another film called The East is Red, or Swordsman 3, which he also directed, I believe. And that movie makes similar use of people fighting on kites. And I think the Japanese are even involved in that one too. But you have like ninjas on kites type of situations, and a lot of similar type of visuals. But I thought the wire work in this looks really sharp. It's got like it cuts across the sky, and the way that it's almost like it's the kind of thing that you normally only see in anime. Do you know what I mean? Like it requires animation to kind of get the style that the film is striving for.
This one nailed it though. It's got a sharpness to it. You're right. This is kind of a kinetic directiveness to it. And they like launch. That's how I describe it. They launch around. They don't like jump. They're like zoom.
I also. Go ahead.
I just said it's something to see. That's it. That's all I had to say. This wasn't substantial.
I also like how the Norman Chu character's master sends him off. Like he's going off to this duel, and their school has this motto. It's basically kind of like the Cobra Kai motto, like no mercy to the enemy ever. Like never hesitate. Always kill. It's much more lengthy though and poetic. But in fact, I wonder if that's where the Karate Kid got that idea from.
Yeah, I wonder, because you're right. It's very similar to Cobra Kai.
But either way, the master puts a mask on and attacks him on a bridge, and because he's been trained to just kill without thinking about it, he kills the guy that's attacking him only to learn it's his master, and then his master has him recite that pledge. As he's lying there dying in his arms. Yeah. And I think the point of it is he's trying to send him off fully committed to the duel. If you can kill your master, you can kill anybody.
Right. And an important thing to point out for those who don't follow Wuxia tropes very well, killing your master is like killing your own father. It's a big deal. Yeah. It's a huge deal.
And it's a moving scene too. It's a moving scene. Go ahead.
I said it is very good. That was actually the moment where I was totally sold on the movie, because until then there was a lot of wacky hijinks with ninjas and stuff like that. But that scene is one where you're like, oh holy hell, this is going to be quite a ride, isn't it? I wasn't expecting that depth of feeling that suddenly. That's a really good way to describe the impact of this movie on you.
Yeah, it rounds out the Norman Chu character very well, because he really is a character that he could have been in danger of being really one note, because he is kind of like he's the stereotypical sort of Japanese warrior who just doesn't hesitate to kill. But they throw in that story that it gives him this background that it adds weight to why he's the way he is. Do you know what I mean? It's like he's fully committed to this idea, but it's not like he's completely untouched by all of the stuff that goes into it. Do you know what I mean? And he does a good job of taking what is often a very taciturn and hidebound kind of approach to tradition and loyalty, and exhibiting the human element and the emotion that's behind the kind of cultured mask. It's a really, really good scene, and it does that a few times with this character, and it's a great way, because again, his performance feels subdued unless you see all of those scenes too, and then you're like, oh wait, this guy is like this really well crafted mask on top of this maelstrom of powerful emotions. Yeah, because he's a jovial character in a lot of scenes. We see him with the kids, when he shows the kid how to deal with the bully, and we see the scene where he's drinking. With right, this is right before the scene with the master, I think, where he's drinking.
Yeah, and he's partying with his friends.
Yeah, and so he's a pretty well developed character, and the Damon Lau character is just a very smooth, genteel, chivalrous character. You know what I mean? But it works. It works really well. And Damon Lau can play a lot of types. He's very good at sort of. I don't think I've ever seen him in a role where I've been like, oh, that was horrible,
Yeah.
So, and also Eddie Ko is in it as the sort of tricky monk that's behind the plot involving the Shogun.
Another really fun character.
Yeah, and he's great. And it's funny because you always you always see, like whenever he's in a movie, you see the eyes first, and it's something about his eyes. I think he just has this like presence that.
There's a lot of expressiveness to him, even though like he doesn't do like goofy faces like Jim Carrey. Like there is something about his face that's really animated. Like he conveys it really well. So yeah, I concur. Very characterful kind of presence.
And now the other thing I wanted to talk about, because we're going on for 20 minutes, and I do want to get into some gaming stuff, and I want to. This is where I used the movie for gaming. Do you remember the thread scene with the poison into the?
Oh yeah, that was a great scene.
They lower a thread from the ceiling. There's like a ninja in the roof, and he lowers a thread, and then he drops the poison down the thread into the cup, and it's so elegant and perfect. But it's also the most gameable thing I've ever seen in terms of ninja attacks, because number one, there's clearly like a means that the poison is like there's a clear way for you as the game master to say like make a detect roll, or for the player to be like I'm looking around, do I see anything, and you can clearly indicate what it is. Do you know what I'm saying? So
yeah, it's also whenever they succeed on the roll, you can still present them with a mystery. I love that in games. You have to roll to see if you can even notice it, but when you do, you see a string dangling over your bowl, and there's a single drop just kind of cascading down. It drips into your porridge. What do? Well, that's such a wonderful thing to present a player with.
Well, what I like too is I always like saying, okay, this is going to be this is sort of the thing where the players can like notice this. Do you know what I mean? Like this is like the chance that they have, and then it doesn't feel like a predetermined. Oh, you were just poisoned. Like no, it was just that you drank from the cup. You're poisoned. It was. It's got a little bit more. There's just one additional step that triggers that detect roll, and then once the detect roll is triggered, it's a nice visual that can lead somewhere because it must be coming from the roof. Somebody must be on the roof. So in my game, I don't remember the specifics. I know we recorded the session and posted it, so what I'm about to say might actually be incorrect because it's been like a year. But what I recall was something along the lines of they were traveling with a guy called Iron God Mung, and somebody wanted to poison him or kill him, and so when they went to a tavern, this is what happened. And so in this situation, it wasn't like a PC's life was on the line. It was directed at an NPC, but it was an important NPC, and whether that NPC died or lived in this moment would have directed the campaign in two totally different directions. And so if I recall, I don't think that they saw the thread. I think that he did get poisoned, but then they saw the thread, and they were able to catch the assassin and then get the antidote within time to prevent Iron God Mung from dying. And I think if I recall, it boiled down to either a single roll or like a really tight window. So it was like this really suspenseful moment in the game.
That's great.
But I think that, but scenes like that are they're like, in terms of gaming, you see these scenes and you're like, oh, I'm going to use that in a game. And, and I think there's quite a few like that. I mean, the plot too is also, I think, something you could take. Like the idea of like maybe not kidnapping 18 heroes, but kidnapping one or two might be more manageable in a campaign. But it's an interesting MacGuffin, I don't know. Does that meet the definition of MacGuffin, by the way? I know we've discussed that in the past.
I don't know. I lost hold of it conceptually a little while ago.
Okay.
I thought. I mean, like, I don't think it's technically a MacGuffin. I think it's a plot hook element.
Okay.
Oh, plot point. I don't know what you call it. But I always like the framing device of there's an important tournament or an important like official thing that's happening, and then there's some sinister thing happening in the background. I really dug that about this. And that's something you can use in a game, too, where, like, they're going to a state dinner or a tournament, duel to death, or anything, like any big official thing with something nefarious happening in the background.
In fact, let me do a shameless plug of Tournament of Dalu right now.
Plug it.
If anybody plays Wuxia games, check out Tournament of Dalu. It's a PDF. I think it might have been pay. Yeah, I think it is pay what you want, so you could probably get it for free. But it's exactly what Joel's talking about, a tournament with a sinister thing going on in the background.
Beautiful.
No, but I love that. I love that kind of a plot. Tournaments and martial arts really go well together for obvious reasons, and so it's a natural fit. and I think this is an example of a tournament done well because it's number one. There's not a lot of movies, and I like movies like this, but like you think like a movie like Bloodsport, which I just did with Steve on the other podcast episode of what was that? Bloodsport Commando is what we call that show. We did Bloodsport, and in a movie like that, it's like a big giant tournament where a bunch of guys have to fight, and there's a whole lot of, you have to kind of watch like the branches of the brackets, get down to the final showdown. But in this one, they didn't have to do that because they had the conspiracy, and then the duel at the end is more of an ad hoc thing that the competitors themselves initiate. So it's a little bit cleaner in terms of the storyline.
It's a lot easier to follow, and I think the complexity of the plot means that you need to have a simpler tournament.
Yeah, well, especially in a game, if you're going to do tournaments are tricky. I've done a lot of tournament games, and they can work, but some of the problems that arise are, well, how do you? Number one, you do have to have your brackets sort of set up, right? Because if you have a tournament, and I know there aren't brackets in this one, but we're talking tournaments. You need to have competitors, and you need to have a way of resolving when the players aren't fighting, but other people are. How do you determine who's getting through the you know what I mean? So that it's so that it feels like a real tournament. Do you know what I mean? Because I've participated in tournaments. I don't know if you have. I know you did Tai Chi. I don't know if they do tournaments, or is that more?
I never got that into it with Tai Chi. I went to Magic the Gathering tournaments. Does that count?
But there's a whole thing where you're sort of waiting your turn, and like you don't know who you're going to fight until some of the fights have cleared out, and those are the reason why you need a method for determining the brackets is because that's opportunities for the players to interfere with outcomes. Do you know what I mean?
Yep, which is great. Every time I run a tournament, the players nefariously interfere with it. I love it. Literally every time, woman. My wife was just like, "Oh, not every time. No, every time. She's in all of them."
That's one of the joys of that kind of campaign. And I think also it's really helpful to have, again, it really depends on the system, I suppose, but you really need to think through having characters that are stark in terms of like visual and personality, but also in terms of combat, because that's all that's really, you know what I mean? Like if you're playing, so for example, if you were playing 3E, you would really want to have your builds worked out, I think, for making, because that's a system where it would be very easy to have a really cool concept that just isn't mechanically realized because you made the build in a way that didn't function how you wanted it to.
There's not a lot of you really one of the things with third edition was, although you can get mechanically distinct builds that are tactically unique and interesting, you really got to know the system to make that, like, to pull that off consistently.
What's your go-to game that you generally run that isn't a game that you or I make, like a system that you generally lean to? The Adventure Conqueror King system is the one I usually go to. Like, that's my default game. If I think of a new concept, I'm like, okay, well, let's try it next. Now, what are your mechanical options if you're trying to make distinct competitors in a tournament type situation, in a Wuxia type scenario? Is that game come with features that you can exploit, or are there optional material out there? I'm sorry.
No, the reason that I've been making my own game, the reason I'm so interested in stuff like Wandering Heroes, Motorgate, and stuff like that, is because the combat isn't super fascinating to resolve in those. Okay. I mean, it's interesting whenever you're in a dungeon and there's high stakes and there's a lot of there's a lot of variance in the monsters and bad guys. But like, if it's just one guy with a sword fighting another guy with a spear, there's not enough strategically going on with the minutia of the cut and thrust and back and forth to make that really immersive.
I get you.
It's fine, but
that's what you want. I mean, I'm assuming the reason why you want that system is because it's simple and it doesn't require a lot of...
it's approachable.
Yeah.
And making something that's both approachable and tactically nuanced and rich is really hard.
But you know what? In a system like that, what that opens up is the freedom of the GM to improvise stuff. That can be like, and again, I'm not as familiar with that system as you, but I mean,
it's BX, dude.
Oh, it's BX. So I mean, you can say, like, like my this guy has like a parasol that he uses that deflects attacks, and he gets an extra saving throw or something whenever people throw projectiles at him, or
and you can tack on little things like that with almost no difficulty because again, the system's very simple. So it resists. It's mutable. You can describe things different ways, or you can give people like little tricks, like you just said with the parasol. It's a really good little trick,
And in a tournament, that's all you need. You don't need like what I found. And again, I usually use Ogre Gate when I'm doing this stuff. So what I would normally do is, but if I'm doing a tournament, I have to make like 10 guys, right? So I don't want to make like 10 full characters all the time. So what I'll usually do is I'll say, okay, I'm going to just make up 2 signature abilities that are their techniques that they have, like a counter and an attack, and maybe I'll put one other one in there, and I'll generally make them up on the fly. I won't pull them out of the book. I'll be like, okay, this guy's a unique character, and he has like the super fish hook spinning attack or something, and then I just try to figure out what that would be, and so I find that doing it that way is really a handy way to make sure the character stands out and make sure I'm not like going through this grueling process of assembling 8 characters before a session.
Product idea, you could just make a couple of templates for like rolling things where you're like, do you need a tournament fighter right now? Roll on these 3 charts and there he is.
That's probably what I should do. I should probably find a way to randomize the technique concepts. But what I really like about it though is that it's not random. I sort of just take a pen and paper and I just say like, okay, I want this person to do like a somersault in the air where they kick the person in the face thing, and that and okay, what do I think that would be? And I eyeball it. And
you're talking about guidelines. It'd be super useful, and I would exchange money for to have at my fingertips, Brendan. You should write this down.
I did. I wrote it's kind of in the Tournament Adalu book. I get into that in the end. In the final
people, go buy Tournament Adalu. It's free. Can't get a better price.
Well, you know what my problem is? I bury these things, and we were kind of talking about this. Like I put them in like the back of the book where nobody sees them. There's a whole thing in that book on there's a name generator. There's all kinds of stuff in like the appendix, but I don't draw anybody's attention to it in the introduction half the time. So if. That's why, like, people will say to me, like, is there a character sheet in this game? Like, yeah, it's in the last page. Didn't you see it? And they're like, no, I didn't automatically go to the last page to look for the character sheet.
Spoiler alert, I did.
I think most people do that. I think most people do go look for the character sheet. But either way, I think a tournament is a really good structure to have an adventure at. And it's also you can do a lot with it because if you don't want to deal with like all the subplot stuff, you can just focus on the tournament. But you can do all kinds of things in terms of having a mystery to solve, having dangers that the players have to fend off in order to just compete in the tournament. There's all or even if the players were involved in a conspiracy themselves, like there's nothing to say that they couldn't be the Japanese characters in this scenario.
Kidnapping people with kites and giant ninjas split into other smaller Sentai ninjas.
In fact, that might be a really fun adventure. Like you have to not kill, you have to kidnap these grand masters and bring them back so that we can unravel the mysteries of their martial arts. That's that would be an interesting scenario for players to have to solve.
Oh my god, yeah. Really, the tournament's great. This movie is stuffed with really good ideas, and I'm going over it scene by scene in my head. I'm pretty certain every single scene is worth watching in this movie. Like, there's no fat on it. Like, everything is poppy and unique and fun,
and it really gets your blood rolling. Like, it really does a good job of getting you excited about what's coming next, and keeping you invested in the characters. And like I said, I think it's that weird mix of goofiness and quality that like it's really good filmmaking. Like, there are moments in this movie where you're like, wow, that was a really great, like the end shot when he's, you know what I mean, when they have the 2 fighters on the precipice overlooking the ocean. That shot is just beautiful, and it's not just like a random beautiful shot. There was so much building up to that moment in the movie, and I think that's that. It's very easy to come up with a cleverly structured shot. It's not easy to have all of the moving parts of the film lead to that moment and have it have the weight that scene had.
There's actually a lot of structure like that to this movie. uh, it's really wonderfully interconnected.
Yeah,
Man, this
and,
it's
and,
lots better.
and in fact, the reason I had mentioned this movie to you, number one, I knew it was a Gonzo type movie, and I thought and that's what you were in the mood
Yeah.
for when you asked for a recommendation. But also, we're going to be doing a Chinese ghost story, and he directed a Chinese ghost story, so I thought,
Oh, okay.
I
Was
thought
that the
that,
secret I was supposed to figure out?
yep. Now, I will say, a Chinese ghost story has a totally different vibe than this one. Though, again, it is a film that sort of has a balance of goofiness and quality and heart that's unexpected. And the same thing, I think, did we do Swordsman 2 or no?
Gee, I don't know. I don't remember.
I feel like we did. I hope we did. But Swordsman 2 is another one. You know, and again, he's just a really good director, I think. And he really gets the fight sequences done well too. Like the fights in his movies are always enjoyable.
Yeah, they're intense, but like you never lose track of what's going on.
Yeah, no, they're very slickly edited. Like they're stylized, and like it's the opposite of a Shaw Brothers movie where like you can see everything that everybody's doing. There's a lot of camera work going on, a lot of editing, but you never get lost, like you're saying. You never feel like you don't understand what's going on. And all of that editing just serves to enhance the action. It doesn't serve to, disguise, the performance.
Yeah,
Like
there's no
especially,
obfuscation.
yeah, I know. Especially in a movie like this, because this is, Damien Lau and Norman Chu. They've been in a bunch of movies like this already. They know what they're doing. And Eddie Ko definitely knows what he's doing. So it's it doesn't have the feel of a movie where they're trying to get around an actor's limitations. And even when this director does do that, if you say he has an actor who's not the best martial arts performer but is a good actor, I feel like he doesn't use the editing that way. He tends to more rely on characters having a powerful presence or something. Do you know what I mean? Which feels like less of a trick to me.
Yeah, even in the scenes where, like, there's clearly actors who aren't necessarily martial artists, and they are literally using ninja tricks to fight. It's carried off in a way that feels dangerous.
Yep.
And it feels dynamic, and it feels like it has the same kind of energy that the rest of the fights have. So, yeah, I think you got something there, Brennan.
Well, when I see a ninja movie, what I want to be surprised by the inventiveness of the ninjas. I want their ingenuity and their preparations to all be a surprise, and for me to marvel at that as it happens. And I felt like they did a very good job. Everything from like using the powder to get the text on the scroll to stuffing dynamite on their bodies and throwing themselves at the monks and then just exploding, and down to some of the really wacky stuff like the giant 5-part ninja character.
Into 5 smaller ninjas. He's full of tinier men.
Well, and what was cool, and again, I think we had originally recorded this and we had some problems, so we had to start over. So I don't know if we touched on it in this version or not. So I'm just going to address it now. But that scene where you have the giant ninja, it turns out it's actually 5 guys or maybe 5 ladies, because one of them disrobes and starts doing a seductive dance, and then that's how she ensnares the monk character. That
Not even 100% certain that was actually a lady. Not gonna lie to you. That might have been sexy no jutsu. So
yeah, I don't know what was going on in that scene, but number one, it sort of reminded me a little bit of the 5-Element Ninja, because you did have the scene where you had the woman, but it was like, I think this scene was much more effective in how it was handled. Like it was the way that the film was edited really made that scene bizarre. That I don't think you could have done if you were shooting it like a more classic Shaw Brothers film.
Yeah, it's definitely distinct from the Shaw Brothers stuff. So we watched the Shaw Brothers film too. We'll get into that in a minute. And like you can really tell how unique this one is, like when you contrast them. One of the things I wanted to point out about the ninjas is that they don't just surprise and shock the characters; they surprise and shock you as an audience member as you're watching it. That's really nice.
Yeah,
so it's a nice emotional unity between viewer and actor.
And we should get into 8-Diagram Pole Fighter, because I know that you watched it. I've done it on the program before. We've done it on Wuxia Weekend. I think I've done it on an independent review that I did. But this was your first time seeing it, and it's a film set during the Song Dynasty. It's a Lau Kar-leung film. It stars Kara Hui, Gordon Liu, and it stars Alexander Fusheng, who died during the making of it. So it's it has a certain significance to it, and it's a early '80s Shaw Brothers film. So it's got I think a slightly different vibe than some of the '70s ones, and it's it's a Yang family movie. So. What's your review of it? What did you think of this movie?
Well, you can kind of tell, like, 'cause I was watching it, and at some point, Alexander Fusheng's character vanishes from the movie. Yeah. Brother 6 is gone, and then Brother 5 takes over, and you can kind of tell that wasn't their original view for it, but they do carry it off really well. The only kind of startling thing is just how abruptly and completely he vanishes from the movie.
Yeah. He just. I mean, they don't even attempt to explain it, really, right? They just
no. We're done with that now, and they don't resolve any of the things he did with the movie. And I think that upon reviewing like the context of it, that was to preserve his last unfinished work, because he died while they were shooting, so he didn't get to finish the whole thing. They didn't get to complete his arc. But all of his acting is still in the movie, and it's really, really good. Okay, so there's a lot to appreciate in this movie. I do like that it has a really powerful structure, despite what is a gigantic tragedy that happened while filming it. Like, it begins in this extremely, literally explosive war scene with this chaotic maelstrom of fighting and a lot of character deaths, and it also ends that way. I noticed that while I was watching it very clearly. They start in the battlefield and they really end on the battlefield, really fighting the same enemy with the same stakes.
Yep.
So that was really cool. There's a sort of haunting, 1-2 step unity between Brother 5 and Brother 6, the only surviving Yang brothers of the massacre that begins at the beginning of the movie.
Yep.
And it really does feel like there's a scene where they both fall asleep and they're having a nightmare. And one of them falls asleep, and the other one wakes up crying out the other one's name. And, that was this moment in the movie where you could kind of, subtly feel the baton getting handed off to Brother 6 from Brother 5, where it's this sun is setting, another one's rising over here. There's a lot of stuff like that in this movie that gives it a startling and emotionally impactful unity that is really, really fun to watch.
I feel like this is a movie that just intentionally breaks the fourth wall a little bit. It kind of like you have to know the backstory to really sense it, but it's something that they've talked about. Like, Kara Hui has singled this out as one of her favorite films that she's been in, and the reason is the emotional weight of it due to the death of Alexander Fusheng, and you see it in it's an emotional movie regardless. The whole way through, this is an emotional film. It opens up even before his death with just this really emotional battle scene where people are slaughtered, but there are scenes, and again, I don't know the timing. I don't know how often it's the case that when I'm seeing scenes like this, Alexander Fusheng was still alive or if he had already died. But there's a lot of scenes where Gordon Liu and Kara Hui have tears in their eyes, you can see their eyes watering, and it feels like that's maybe related to what happened. Do you know what I mean? Especially in that final battle. That final battle it's the most cathartic final battle that I can really think of on screen.
It is cathartic, and I wonder how much of that is acting and how much of that was just the genuine reaction to the tragedy.
And I don't know. I mean, I would imagine a lot of it was a very genuine reaction. And also I think the way that they did it too, because again, they were also sort of hampered too, because the thing that Gordon Liu's character is supposed to be learning is how to defang the enemy, not how to kill it, right? Because that was the whole thing with the teeth smashing staff thing that he was learning. And there was, but what's interesting about it is, even though it's they're smashing, they're supposed to be using this non-lethal technique, watching them smash out these guys' teeth over, and it's the most brutal thing. That
I know. It's really that had a strong impact on me. I've had a lot of dental work this year, so as you know, I'm kind of sensitive about it. But Yeah, they violently like shove metal poles in people's mouths and rip out their teeth, and the teeth, like the prop teeth, go flying. Blood spurts out of their mouths. You can see like the gaping wounds in their mouth from the shredded teeth. It's pretty stomach turning, not gonna lie. And I'm like, yay, pacifism.
And the fight, it's interesting. It's pacifism with an edge to it, I guess. I don't know. It's a
horrifically violent pacifism.
Yeah. It's but it's interesting because you see that scene where he's training on the dog dummies taking out their teeth, and you're sort of like, well, that seems kind of like an ineffectual method. But then when they're smashing out the teeth in the end, it's brutal. It's brutal, and the fight choreography is so good that. This has some really spectacular fight scenes, and again, the quality of the sort of emotional quality to all the fight scenes really gives it I think great fight scenes are great, but it's when you get that emotional, undercurrent with them that they really have an effect on the viewer. At least for me, I find that the more emotion they can work into the fight choreography, the more effective it is. And that's... Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I said I concur.
And it's definitely on display here. So did you enjoy the movie? Would you recommend it?
You will be transported by this movie, like I certainly was. It's powerfully emotional. And beyond that, like, there's a lot to appreciate when you're watching it. Like, it has a lot of unexpected richness and depth to it, which is really just... it's really good to watch.
Well, there's the whole scene where he goes to the temple, for example, and he sort of demands to be made a monk.
And they're like, "No, you're a half-crazed warrior from a warrior clan. No, you can't be a monk." So he shaves his own head, which is extremely awful and stupid to do from the guy who just gave himself a haircut. Really easy to cut yourself, and he does. Like, as he's shaving his head, like, there's this clear, like, trickles of blood coming off where he's screwing it up. Then he takes the incense sticks and he puts the little, I don't know what they're actually called, the little Buddhist dots into his own head by burning them into his skull, which you get to see in all of its glory. It's so agonizing and intense that he passes out for like a week afterwards in character, and I was watching that movie like, oh god, it's almost like a torture scene, except there's clearly this catharsis for the character. So
that scene was so well done, because when he wakes up and they give him, the monks bring him food and he starts to eat it, and then I think he throws the food aside when they tell him he has to leave. I get hungry and upset watching him throw the food away, because I know how exhausted this guy. You know what I mean? Like you can feel how hungry he would be, and he's just discarding this meal that he definitely needs to eat. So it's just one of those. And if they hadn't done a good job of building up to it, I wouldn't have felt that way. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, because I think they wedge in a scene between him passing out and him waking up, and it's a pretty lengthy scene, so you feel that passage of time with him.
Yeah.
A lot of really good structure to it like that.
Yeah, I think this is. I mean, it's a really great movie. I don't know if it doesn't. Some people respond to it differently, so I always kind of put like an asterisk next to it, because I think number one, it's a movie that you probably need a little familiarity with the genre before you get to it. Maybe it might not be the best first Wuxia movie, though. I don't know. Maybe I'm mistaken, because I'm sure there are people out there who this was their first film and they adored it. So I don't know. I know that there are people like. Whenever I put out anything on 8 Diagram Pole Fighter, I usually get a reaction. Like, I usually get some kind of reaction from people. So it's definitely one of those movies that has an effect.
Yeah, it's impactful. I don't know that I'd recommend it as a first Wuxia movie. I think that you should at least know a little bit about, like, because there's a lot of bureaucracy, and there's a lot of, like, actual Chinese history blended in here. There's a lot of family structure stuff, and there's the stuff with Buddhism. It helps to have some cultural understanding of what the hell's going on. Yeah. Otherwise, it could be easy to get lost, I think.
You know what movie I would recommend watching before this? I'd recommend watching 14 Amazons, and then watching this. Have we done 14 Amazons or no?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, at some point we should do 14 Amazons. It's another Yang family movie, but it focuses on different characters, and I think it's a good introduction. And also, there's a lot of mirroring. I feel like this movie is aware of 14 Amazons in the way it presents some of the scenes. But yeah, no, I think this is a very good movie. And Lau Kar Leung is, we've done a few of his films now, haven't we? Like you did My Young Auntie, right? Did you do Legendary Weapons of China with me?
Yes, I did.
So I mean, I think you have a better sense now of Lau Kar Leung as a director.
Oh yeah, Legendary Weapons of China and this reminded me of Legendary Weapons of China a lot. Like in the ultimate fight scene where they just completely go for broke at the very end. That seems to be a very Lau Kar Leung move.
Well, I think the quality of the martial arts is a Lau Kar Leung thing. You know, you get very sort of like, you know, it's real. It's like real martial arts that you usually are seeing on the screen. Like it's done for movie, so it's stylized. But you'll see, like, stuff that just has more authenticity to it. And so that's that. You know, you could argue it's his strength and it's his weakness. But I think it's something that really sets his movies apart. And I feel like you know, this is one of the top movies in terms of the fight choreography for Lau Kar Leung. I mean, I don't think. Well, let me rephrase that. I don't think I've ever seen a bad fight scene in a Lau Kar Leung movie, just because he's so good at that. But this is up there in terms of the quality.
Well, that and like the technical quality is really impressive. Like the beginning and end of the movie are these gigantic war scenes with dozens of actors in the frame at the same time, all choreographed in a chaotic and like really impactful fight scene that loses none of its impact for having that much visual density to it, that much movement. Yeah. Like that's really impressive to pull off, and he does it at the beginning and the end of the movie, and both of them have the same kind of chaos but a different kind of feel. Yeah, that's amazing.
No, and that opening scene is great too, because it's got this like surreal, stagey quality to it. It's obviously done on a sound stage or something, but that, to me, that always is more immersive, because then I sort of enter like a dream state when I'm watching it. Do you know what I mean? It feels like just unreal enough that it's got this opaque sort of celestial quality to it, and so I really like that opening scene for that reason. It's again, I guess in like a Western movie, I'd compare it to like the way that those sort of sets were used in Dracula, the Francis Ford Coppola movie. Like if you can use sets to enhance reality in a way that, you know, is more immersive than reality itself.
Yeah, I concur. It's part of the magic of cinema doing something like that. And you're right. There's an almost dreamlike quality. There's something nightmarish and upsetting about that scene visually. Yeah. And it makes it serve as a nice kind of yang to the yin of the final scene, which is much more brightly lit, like much more natural lighting. It's inside.
No.
So it balances in a really interesting way.
Now, we're coming towards the end because I have limited time, but I do want to get into gaming stuff here, because I was curious if you had any gaming thoughts on this movie. Was there anything that you thought about in terms of design? Did it inspire anything? Do you think this movie maybe isn't particularly suited for game inspiration?
It's very suited for gaming. For example, whenever Alexander Fushin's character staggers back from the battle, he's completely insane with grief and horror, and he plays that through really well. And it got me thinking about how imbalances work in my game, which is like the way they worked in Legends of Wuxia and Weapons of the Gods, where you're incentivized to, as a player, kind of ham it up and act in a certain way to represent the emotional turmoil of the character. And it got me thinking, like, well, a good way to incentivize any kind of roleplay like that, or any kind of action in a role-playing game, is by creating an incentive system for it. So in mine, it's like you get XP whenever you do something like that, and you can spend that towards healing yourself or just to getting more powerful and staying crazy. So I was thinking about that. Yeah, you always like game.
What I was thinking about too, and I've sort of toyed with this in places in the past, but I've never fully committed to it. But in martial arts movies, in wuxia books and movies, characters, they don't, and I mentioned this because you mentioned XP, they don't get new abilities because they leveled necessarily. Yeah. I mean, there is leveling, there is actual leveling of a technique in this genre, but they get the abilities because they learned them. Do you know what I mean? Like somebody said, here's the manual, and then they trained, and maybe they had to like have a breakthrough of some kind. And I with a film like this, it sort of makes me very tempted to use a much more free form. You know how to use the tooth smashing staff technique because you actually went and did this. You trained for a month and like in game, and then this is the byproduct of all that training because. Oh, yeah.
Because that's you get trained for stuff in my game.
Well, because I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's such you are very correct. That is such an important element, especially in Wuxia, where you don't just I killed X many goblins or got X many treasure. Now I'm generally better. Yeah. It's very concrete and specific. It's like no, I learned the dog smashing tooth technique from this one abbot. Because I trained. Remember when I trained? Yeah. Like, all of that is necessary to preserve the feel. And so I made certain to translate it into the game as best as I could.
Well, and that's hard, because, I mean, I think in gaming, like, I remember even in D&D, they had the old training rules that, like, almost nobody I knew used. But, I mean, I knew people who used them, but it was very rare that I went to a group that actually used those rules. Now, if you did use those rules, they're perfect for this sort of thing. But I find in a lot of games, you tend to, there's not enough of a one-to-one connection between I'm going to the temple and this master is showing me the technique and I'm getting the technique. There's usually some other thing like I don't have enough experience yet or I don't have this or that kind of makes that a little bit more prohibitive in play. And
yeah, it's a little muddier, and you have to orchestrate the timing a lot better.
Yeah.
Actually, in my game, I was realizing something as an outgrowth of the social system, in that different people will be more or less willing to teach you their magic martial arts depending on your actions.
Yep.
And so, what I'm thinking about doing, I haven't done anything concrete with this yet, is making it so at any given point you have a list of people that are willing to teach you the techniques and what those techniques are and why. And as you adventure, their attitude towards you changes, and the attitude of different NPCs will change toward you and open up different techniques. So when you get enough XP to train, you choose which one to go to, and you spend your scene training and get the power.
Okay, that could certainly work.
I know, right? I was really happy when I thought of that. And it's just an outgrowth of the really kind of structured way that scenes balance against each other. Which, again, giving credit where it's due, that's just Gygax again. Gygax was really clear on you have to keep notes on time in a campaign.
Yeah.
The only downfall to that was that he was count the minutes and hours, where I think that I got a life. I don't really have time to, this took X amount of days. How about it takes one big scene and you can take that is that many little scenes or something like that. It's a little easier to track whenever you do it that way.
Yeah.
More abstract, granted, but...
So unfortunately, we are out of time. I'm going to have to end it here. I apologize. We were just getting into a good discussion. Well, next time we're going to talk about techniques in XP, I think. I think that's a topic we should bring up. But, yeah, so I'm going to end it here because it's been an hour. And I think we're going to have it won't be a Duel to the Death Part 2, but I think we're going to have to continue the themes that were raised in our next discussion. I don't know how feasible that'll be if our next movie is a Chinese ghost story, though, because thinking about it, it might not quite match what we're trying to cover. But
because I feel like there was a lot more to talk about with this movie. So.
There was definitely, and we just literally ran out of time, which is a big shame. So what I want you to do is I want you to remember that we were talking about XP and techniques. Maybe review some of the stuff that you have in your own game so that we can be ready to bring it up again. And
talk about my stuff.
And so that's what I'm saying. And so we're gonna have to head out, and we will be back on hopefully soon with the Chinese ghost story. I suspect we might have another movie in between because it's a matter of getting the DVD, the Blu-ray to Joel, and the shipping is being a little bit frustrating to deal with. So all right. So I guess that's it. And on Friday, people can check out Wuxia Weekend for Supreme Swordsman, and then I believe on Saturday, me and Adam are going to cover the drama series version of The 11th Son. So we got a lot of stuff lined up, and we will talk to you later.